Hi, welcome to this week's Authors Love Readers podcast, where we delve into the stories behind the stories. We're asking authors questions, some of them fun, some of them serious, and from their answers, you're going to learn things you never knew about the people who write the stories you love. My name is Patricia McLinn. I'm your host and designated question asker.
I'm Kate Moore, and I'm an author who loves readers.
Now, let's start the show. Hi, and welcome to this week's episode of Authors Love Readers podcast. My guest this week is Kate Moore, and I think this is going to be a really interesting discussion because we usually have very interesting discussions. I'm not sure how we first met, Kate. Was it through the AOL group, the online group?
It was the online back when there was dial-up.
Yes.
Writing listserv with all the funny noises that dial-up used to make.
Yeah. Yep.
Great. And then we met for the first time in Hawaii.
Oh my gosh, you remember that? Okay. That was the Romance Writers of America conference in Hawaii. I think it was the last time they'd been there.
Yes.
It was terrific though, because it was a smaller conference and we got to meet and talk more. And Kate and I have very different approaches. And so I think our discussions are always particularly interesting because I always think of yours as very measured, the way you approach writing. And well, we'll get into that later. But so we have really interesting discussions. And first thing I want you to do, though, is to tell the readers what kind of books you write.
I write books about outsiders or loners who need to be drawn into the circle of love. I write books about falling in love in the midst of family, which is what most of us have to do. There are aunts and uncles and moms and dads and siblings around watching us, and we don't get the desert island or river raft alone by ourselves experience as the place where we fall in love. I write about the darker side of London in the early 19th century and the lighter side of love.
Well, that's really interesting. And the way you said it, what is it? So a lot of those things are about love and drawing people in, and then boom, there's the darker side of London.
Yes. I've always been fascinated by, when I first started thinking about writing, well, I was 10. I was going to write a saga called In the Shadow of the Wine Bottle about the rise and fall of a California family, but for various reasons.
As a 10-year-old.
I did not write that novel.
It's still in you, Kate, waiting to come out.
And what hooked me as I started reading Jane Austen and then the Regency romances that I first started reading in the early 80s, what hooked me was this sharp contrast between the glittering ballrooms and the streets that Dickens knew so well. So I was interested in that sharp contrast and knowing that for most of Austen's life, England was at war. And for most of the people in Hare's novel, they were affected as well by the fact that there was a gruesome war, really a war such as we have seen in the late 20th and early 21st century, a really gruesome war happening not far away. And people were allowing themselves to dance and marry and drive their carriages in the park. And yet very young men were involved in terrific conflict, very difficult conflict of the kind that we know from kind of war correspondent stories. So it's an interesting moment to locate characters in.
To me, too, looking at the history of England, thinking it's sort of a transition between the Georges and
Yes.
sequences, the Georges, and that even though it was still George the Third with the Prince Regent and then George the Fourth, there was still this feeling of switching toward what became Victoria's very long reign. And I also think it's really interesting. I probably have told you this, but I went to a museum in Bath, England, and it was underwear. And
Sure.
it might have been on more costume, but what really caught me was the underwear, and it was so fascinating because you're looking at the women's underwear chronologically, and in the late 1700s they had these, massive structures that they wore. And then you go into the Regency period where it was just slips and no foundations really at all. And what got me is then they went back to the very restrictive, heavy
Yes.
torture chambers. And so you have this period in between where you don't have that. And I always, it fascinated me.
And it's so many transitions are happening. And that one, I think, has some parallels for people of my generation and my mother's. She's passed away, but there was such a liberation during the World War II years for what women could do. And then by the time I reached high school, there was this turnaround that had to be shaken off yet again. These cycles that women go through, which their clothing reflects on how freely they can just stride through the world or not.
Mm. Mm. And that was something too. I've mentioned on another podcast. I've read a lot of stuff about women traveling the Oregon Trail and how many of them would take the petticoats off during the travel because it was dangerous. Fires and getting caught in wagon wheels and I've read statistics that more people were killed in those sort of things. Fires and accidents with the wagons than ever were in conflict with the Indians. Anyhow, women would they'd take that off, they'd hoist their skirts up so they could be much more active. And yet when they got to what they considered civilization, they gladly put all the stuff back on.
Huh.
Yeah. And I guess it made, I don't know, it made them feel like what they were women, they were supposed to feel like. I think it's really interesting that they did put that back on. So, okay, let's ask some questions to let the listeners get to know you. I was gonna say as I do, but I won't know the answers to some of these. So we'll start with a classic. What's your favorite color?
It's blue. It's blue. I gravitate toward blue. I have
Always?
Well, it's interesting. For years, when we first married, everything was blue. The china, the elaborate batiqued Roman shades that I made by hand for all the windows, the bedspread, everything was blue. But not anymore. Blue is my favorite color. I'll stand by that forever. I will gravitate toward blue anytime there's a clothing rack. But my house is now very different. There's now a lot of soft green and more English things. My house has become more English the more I've written these novels. And so there's wonderful reds and greens, very different from where I started.
That's interesting. And do you know why you always gravitate to blue? Is there an association with it?
I don't think so, although there's certainly some memorable blues. I remember as a very young child seeing the middle of the Pacific Ocean. If you see the beach at the shore, it's, at least in Northern California, the ocean is gray or brown almost. Then you get out in the middle of the Pacific and it is purple blue. It is astonishing color, how deep and blue it is. And I just have never forgotten that color. It's just amazing.
Let's continue with childhood, and let me ask you if you have a book or a couple books that you can put your mind back and say, yeah, that is the point at which I became addicted to stories.
It would be hard for me to say I just wasn't always addicted. I was pretty addicted very, very early, and there is a falling apart yellow book of stories that has a little note in the first page from my aunt and uncle when I was 4, and that is a book that I read obviously over and over again and drew on the pages, and it had all these wonderful stories. But it was shortly followed by Pooh. And Pooh is where the love of everything English comes. Pooh is all the language of spinneys and copses and the 100-acre woods, marmalade, all those things. I just don't think there was ever anything like Pooh. So it's great fun to have a grandson who loves Pooh. It set me on a path to loving books. I always read every book that I was given at school on the first night, completely, cover to cover. You know those readers you get?
Yeah.
You got readers and you were supposed to keep them all year, but you got sent home to put the folding cover on them because they didn't belong to you. I would just read the whole book the first night, whatever. And then probably not read it again when I was supposed to in class, but I would certainly have read the book right away. One of the things that people will ask me is, why romance, of course. And in our household, we were discouraged from reading romance. And we were surrounded by books, so many books, which I loved growing up surrounded by books. And books to listen to, there were recorded books, which then were on LPs, but we would spend hours as children with the lights off in the living room, listening to our favorites over and over and over again. Our dad would read whole books to us, but they weren't romances because we were not encouraged to think romantic thoughts or be romantic. In the most, we were supposed to be very practical young women and men and be very focused on the practical world, and romance was not encouraged. We were allowed to read true romance comics in the summer in the cabin in the woods. So when I encountered the Virginian in the public library and could secretly check it out without my mother knowing, I did. I checked that book out every time it was in. And then she allowed me to read Katherine because it was about Chaucer. So it was okay because it was about Chaucer. But those things were just eye-openers about what did I really like? I really like these stories.
When I first started reading romance, which is what, after somebody recommended I try writing it, I started reading some of them, and I got to some of the really good ones, and I thought, okay, this connects. This is the peace part of War and Peace, which was the part I really liked, the relationships and what made people tick and all that. And the war part of War and Peace, I was like, yeah, there's another battle. Let's get past this and get back to the people.
Absolutely. Completely.
Yeah.
And I think when I was reading Janice Radway about her readers, and I was thinking about those readers reading romance, and she was sort of wondering, well, why read so many romances? Why isn't one enough? And I'm thinking, well, it's because they're in recovery. It's because they went to an American high school, and everything they read had no heroines, had no happy endings. They read of Mice and Men. They read The Grapes of Wrath. They read The Scarlet Letter. They read Julius Caesar. I mean, the list of what we read in high school is hasn't changed a great deal. There's a common core of what students read in American high schools, which is not romance ever. And I think you might need to read, a couple hundred of them to recover from that early reading experience.
Now you've got to give background though to the listeners. First of all, tell who Janice Radway is.
Janice Radway is an early scholar of romance, and now there's a great deal of scholarship around the reading and writing of romance. And she started it as a study of a group of readers, thinking that they were somehow not feminist and not like her, that they were subjects that she could study who were, the antithesis of her intellectual academic
Mm-hmm.
world. And she, it's interesting that even as she maintained that position mainly through her book, she began to understand them better. Since then, there's just a great deal of romance scholarship. Um, I've written one piece about the writer Jenny Cruzy with a professor from DePaul University, Eric Selinger. And Eric Selinger at DePaul and a man named Billy Gleason, who is the chair of I think he goes by William now. He's the chair of the English department at Princeton. They've written together a study of American romance. And it's become a serious academic study. People get their doctorates in it. There's an international organization and a journal. RWA, of course, sponsors this research, understanding that romance is important literature and understanding how it works and why we write it, why we respond to it the way that we do. And just an aside, William Gleason is a person who was my student at a boys' school in LA.
And that was the other part I wanted you to get to
Yeah.
about why you not only have strong feelings about, but have chops about what's
Well,
taught in American high schools.
no, I did. I taught for 45 years in 5 different schools. Great experience. I love teaching, but I wanted to tell you about Bill Gleason because I wrote his college recommendations, and he was
Oh.
the first babysitter of my daughter when he was a senior in high school, and he had a young sister, and he was a great babysitter. And now he's a great department chair, and he's interested in this world of relationships that we write about, all of us write about in a great community of romance writers.
Well, that's terrific and got us totally off, but I really enjoy it. And we talked about your career in teaching, and I, you should also say you taught for all those years. You were department head, weren't you?
Yes, I was.
Yeah, she says with such enthusiasm.
Yeah,
But
I was department head, and it's interesting. I think it's interesting at this moment when we're all thinking about, sort of women, and their experiences and where we are as women kind of moving forward. It's interesting because when I started teaching in independent schools, and I was very young. It was my third teaching job, but it was my third year of teaching as well. And everyone who started with me, well, there were only 2 women in the school because it was a boys' school. All the other young men who started quickly rose to be heads of school. But my path, being, a married woman, my path involved working around children and not being in any hurry, career wise, to hit any of these marks. It just wasn't in the cards. So it was kind of accidental in the end that I got this opportunity to be a chair of a department, and it was terrific. It was a wonderful experience, and I have passed it on to a former student of mine who is the new chair in our school where we both worked, and she's terrific. So it's great fun to see her and to talk to her about doing the work of mentoring teachers and bringing teachers together to have a common view of their subject and to put the students at the center of what they're doing. That's all really good. It's people making work, just like when we're writing, we're creating people, and there you're sort of bringing people along. It's
Yeah,
really
but the
good
ones
work.
who come out of our head are not 100% cooperative, but
No,
I
no,
think they're
nor
more cooperative.
department more cooperative.
That's what I'm saying. I'm saying that would be even more difficult dealing with real people.
I always love, there's, I think, one of the most important insights from a book that I've ever experienced is in the book Atonement. That's Ian McEwan. And the young woman who is at the center of the first part of the book, and she makes a dreadful mistake and does a terrible thing, but she's written a play and she's thinking about it, and she's got the real people who are going to play the characters in her play, and she's realizing, oh dear, real people, and they're not going to embody my character. They're not going to bring my characters to life in the way that I imagined. And she has this thought, what if, she's thinking to herself, and she's 11, I think, and she's thinking to herself, what if everyone has this separate, rich inner life that I have? What if everyone is a complete whole person? And this is this astonishing thought that she has. Um, but it is the ultimate lesson that we're trying to learn. What if that other person that I'm talking to or working with or imagining has a complete inner life? That's such a it's such a hard thing to actually appreciate, but it is what we're trying to do.
But I'm always astonished that people don't have. I shouldn't say I'm always astonished. Maybe I've gotten past this to some point. Because when I was 10 and 11, I thought everybody had stories in their heads the way I did all the time
Oh,
and made them up. So for me, the revelation was the opposite, that people were not constantly making up stories in their head. Um, and I still have trouble sometimes recognizing that.
that there's some kind of division between those of us who are sort of compelled to make up a story or really
Mhm.
cannot stop making stories, and people who never
Have no
never
interest in
think,
it. Yeah.
and they just look at you like you come from another planet.
And many of them, bless them, are consumers of stories, thank heavens. Because I don't know, how many readers would we have if everybody had stories in their heads all the time? You wouldn't need to outsource it. You could just provide your own.
That might be true. It's interesting. I'm fairly new at being a grandparent. There are three little people now that our children have brought to us, and the oldest is 3, and then there's a 2-year-old, and then there's a 3-month-old. The 3-month-old isn't into stories yet. The 2-year
Really?
the
Laggard.
2-year-old is the 2-year-old though is narrating her life constantly. She is Elizabeth is swimming. Elizabeth is, she's narrating her life, and the 3-year-old is so hooked on stories, totally hooked on everything, is cannot go to school without a story on in the car. We read stories all the time. It's interesting how essential the experience of story is, whether you're the consumer or the creator. It is so essential to being a person. I can't imagine not having some connection with story
Yeah.
if if you're a human
Yeah.
being.
To me, especially as a kid, the reading was learning to negotiate the world and aspects of the world before you came face to face with them. It
Mhm.
in real life. Um, and I was always really encouraged to read a lot, to the point that I got books all the time for birthdays and Christmas. My dad would read them first, and sometimes he'd forget where he put them.
Oh.
so, so I'd find I one of my jobs was dusting, and so I'd be dusting his desk, and I'd find this wrapped book, and I'd look at the paper, and it's April, and it's finally come up to the top of the pile and it's in Christmas paper and going, Dad, who is this supposed to go to? And he'd look at it and he'd look at it and he'd look at it and I don't know, open it. And as I'd open it and he'd go, oh yeah, that was a really good one. And I remember one of the books this happened with the Scottish chiefs. Oh gosh, who wrote that? Scott, I think. Sir Walter Scott. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
So this huge big book. He said, oh yeah, those are really good. Okay, Dad. Let's see. Let me ask you about songs. Do you have songs that you can look at from both now and look back to a younger period in your life, and you felt that song really expressed you?
I think songs for me very much express less me, but express moods. Definitely moods. And I, like Chuck Berry,
Oh.
like a great fan of Chuck Berry. I love Chuck Berry songs, and they're a mood of, to me, kind of youthful optimism. And then go figure, I really liked the Doors' Crystal Ship at one point. I must have spent more quarters on listening to Crystal Ship in the college, soda fountain. That was a ritual. I could not tell you why, but that was a powerful song. I love anything, any Beatles ever. And there's some Bob Dylan that, and we'll probably go hear a Bob Dylan cover band this weekend that's doing some of our favorites that's going to play locally in our little town. But, the thing that, people will ask me, well, what music do you like? And I will say, well, Christmas music. It's appalling what an extensive collection of Christmas songs, and they're not popular. You will never hear them in malls. There are Gregorian chants, medieval lays, lots of amazing guitar versions of the great song. Some incredible Mexican folk songs that our family has regarded as Christmas music forever. Christmas music is when Christmas comes, and my husband knows this, it is his job to put away all the music that he ordinarily listens to that dominates our listening. And on the day after Thanksgiving, the playlist goes up with the 400 plus songs, and there's a sequence. You have to start with instrumentals. There can be no words first, but and then we don't let them go until January 6th. I don't have to let them go until Three Kings. And that is it's just musical heaven for me to have all that time in the songs and the music that I just love so dearly.
Well, no,
isn't that crazy?
not at all. Not at all.
Right.
And I have a CD of Gregorian chants. I also have a CD of the Muppets Christmas Carol music. So I have a wide range.
We have the Muppets and John Denver and the Muppets by themselves, and those are important. We only allow the Johnny Cash albums. That is a lesser part of the rotation, but we have those too.
And you could learn something from me and in continuing to play the music. My Christmas tree stays up as long as the Chicago Bears are in the playoffs. Now, the past few years, it's come down earlier, but the year that they were in the Super Bowl, it was up well into February, and
it was a fire hazard
because it's a real tree, and I was still watering it, but I got to so I'd only turn the lights on when they were playing in the last couple games, and I did take it down. I did take it down the day after the Super Bowl, but yes, you can't take the tree down; it might curse them. So if you can come up with a good reason like that, you can extend your Christmas Carol playing past the 6th. See?
Good to know.
So you've talked some about your folks. Do you have sayings that they used to say that now you have adopted and you hear coming out of your mouth, whether you're pleased or not pleased to hear that?
I think it's less sayings, but I definitely know that. Well, our mother was the queen of lists, just the queen of lists, and I am such a list maker, and you know, all of us, we've inherited the cooking things that she
Mm.
did, and the except for the casserole, we've all let go of the casserole, which she was also adept at. And the garden, my garden is just so many things from her, and actually even from my
Oh,
grandmother. I have my grandmother's
that's
geraniums,
wonderful.
and I love having all those things kind of orchestrated. It's less the sayings, but it's the things. It's a doorstop here that came from
Mhm.
her house, or a quilt there. And so there's a pattern of their presence in our lives. And my dad was the great sailor, and so those things are here. I think the one thing my dad said that we have lived by is leave the campsite cleaner than you found it.
So what would your students say was one of your standard sayings?
Oh, my students memorized my standard sayings. They did. They both. There were two things that I asked them uh, to know by heart, and they could get extra credit points for writing these things down on any work that was going to be graded. Any graded piece of work, you could get extra credit for these two sayings. So they all can recite them. I will meet people in a bar that I haven't seen in 25 years, and they will say these two lines to me.
I'm
So, are
ready.
you ready?
I'm not writing them down though, but I
All
am
right.
recording them. So
The first one is language by itself reveals a speaker and his or her world.
I agree 100%.
So you have to pay attention to the language.
Yes.
And I wanted them to pay attention to language and write about the language and notice the language. So I asked them to memorize that one.
As a writer, that's so important because dialogue is characterization because of what you just said.
It is. And everyone actually knows this truth, because we all fall into conversation with someone we haven't met, and within a few minutes, we've made a judgment about that other person just based on the way that person is
Mhm.
talking. We do it all the time. And you can train yourself to be more perceptive of people's language, but it is the great revealer. So I asked them to memorize that, and then I asked them to memorize this one. A poem is a composition written for performance by the human voice.
Oh, that's interesting. I would say I'm not a big fan of poetry. However, I had an experience where I had taken quite a bit of Spanish, and I was taking the Spanish class and had to read poetry in Spanish. And
Mhm.
I appreciated it more as poetry than I have ever appreciated any English language poetry. And I think it's because I could take that half step back away from the comprehension of the words, and I was just listening to the sound more.
Mhm. Mhm.
And that was a very interesting experience for me. So I imagine that there are a lot of people out there who can listen to poetry in their native language the way I can only listen to it in a non-native language, because I get so focused on the meaning. I gotta say though, Kate, I'm not sure that those are going to catch on. I'm not sure we're going to see memes
Yeah,
about
they're
them.
they're very helpful. They're very helpful, to students. And I was always the big proponent of make that second effort. I always advise them to make that second effort, not be satisfied with the first, which they know that I would say that to them. I always told them to write lots of bad sentences to free that inner critic and get some words down on the page.
I have a couple other questions I want to ask you, but let's talk about how you write. You have this idea.
Okay.
Now, how do you make it a book?
Some of the things that help to make it a book, and one of the appeals, I think, of writing genre fiction, which may be the appeal of writing a sonnet, is it's a form. I know people like to say it's a formula, but it's a form, and form helps you craft a good story. I'm a great believer in craftsmanship, and a total craft book junkie. Um, and I one of my images for creating a book is when you take your children to Disneyland and you stand at one of those appalling lines to go on a ride that takes you up and whirls you around and flings you about and brings you back, what your children want to do is do it again. and and that's because the ride is an engineered experience, and it's an engineered emotional experience. And what you're trying to do when you're writing a book is you're trying to engineer an emotional experience for your readers. So you have to go from the idea to the thrill ride in some way. You have to you know think it through, imagine it fully, really start sort of crafting. You have to find a place to begin, a place to lift them up and plunge them down, all those kinds of things that you're thinking about. And the convention of the romance novel, for me, the moment that you've got this idea about this map, maybe, or a different idea I had of that came to me more like a light bulb, in Reno at an RWA conference, and I had just a green piece of paper that I wrote this down on. But the idea that time was, what if you had a courtesan in London and she had three sons by three different lords? What kind of family would that be, and what would happen to those young men? So what's next, I think, with the romance is this, particularly in the time period that I'm setting it, is there's some imperative for young women to marry, whether they want to or not, whether they've got their own ideas about life, their own sense of independence. They are confronted with this imperative to marry. And that usually is, for me, the starting point. How does the heroine become confronted? How does somebody or something confront her with this imperative to marry that she may have been avoiding, or she thought she could skip over, or maybe it wouldn't happen to her, but it does? And how is she going to respond to that? Real societal imperative. Maybe her family is behind it. Very often they're very much behind it, and they have their own ideas about what it means for her. How is she going to respond to that? And of course, that's the way Pride and Prejudice starts. Mrs. Bennet is holding up that societal imperative to her daughters. They've been quite happily, sort of free of it for a while. It's been lurking in the background. And then, Mr. Bingley moves into the neighborhood and she like lands on it like, here we go, girls. Buckle your seats, as you say, and we're going to go for this now, because this is the societal imperative to marry, and we're going to squeeze you and fit you into with whatever suitor comes along. So that, for me, is confronting the heroine with that societal imperative to marry is like the starting point. And then what is she going to do with it, and where does her particular hero fit into that? Often he is not what her family is thinking, or even what she's thinking.
Somewhere, I think I still have the cassette tape of the talk you gave about shaping a scene.
Oh yeah, writing and scene.
Yeah. Yes. And I have this vision of kind of the different ways that we work, that if like moved all of our belongings into a different house from where they were now, that you would very orderly take things out of the boxes and take one thing out of the box and go and place it whichever room it needs to be, and go and take, and work from the structure of the boxes. And when I moved from the house I'd been in for 23 years to the current house, I had all the boxes open. And I had things going. And I didn't do a room at a time. I did layers.
Uh-huh.
And move things, change things. Didn't have them where I'd had them in the previous house. That didn't work. Going to move it to a different place, doing all this. So I had all this chaos. But eventually it came down to, all the boxes were out in the garage. The empty boxes were out in the garage. So you get there eventually. But is that a fair way to talk about how you do it?
It certainly was my way in the beginning, I think. And in the beginning, I was just so orderly about imagining the whole story from beginning to end, solving all the problems, using, with a rubber band and 4x6 cards, one for each scene, whose point of view, how do things have to happen. And I have become more flexible in my
interesting.
I have changed a great deal in my way of working, but I think I continue to rely on my sense of structure, because I think structure and intention are closely connected in what writers do. So I do want to keep that structure in mind. And a very simple structure that I find very effective is what I call the Star Wars structure, based on that very first trilogy, which is, A New Hope Arises, The Empire Strikes Back, and The Return of the Jedi. And you can write almost every scene, every chapter, and every book, just that simple, some sort of hope or forward progress arises. It gets squashed by the Empire. And then, people have to invent plan B, come together, save the day, and restore some kind of order. And I have, found myself very often thinking about that. I have certainly, you asked about beginnings, and basically, the movies have taught us two ways of beginning that are both valid, and I think I've used them both. If you can remember Cowboys and Aliens, do you remember that? That was a bad movie, but it had some existential moments to it.
I'm not sure I saw the beginning of it. So
The very beginning is the main character, and you only see the main character, and he's in a very specific, pickle. He's tied down in the desert, waking up, and really he doesn't even know who he is. He has no idea who he is. So, but it's really centered on him. And then the camera pans out to sort of give you an idea of his predicament. So one approach is you start very narrow with the character somewhere doing something, facing some problem or doing something in his or her life, and you broaden out to, give us the world. Or very often, the other approach that movies have taught us is you get that very wide shot. You're in New York, and then the camera's kind of narrowing down, and gradually you're following one person along the pavement and entering this world through them. And, I think both of those approaches are equally valid. I've tried them both. And, I like them both for getting started in this moment of confrontation of the heroine with the imperative to get married.
So as you're writing now, do you have a structure all set out? Do you outline?
No. I have just written,
Yay!
3 books with, no idea of where we were going. Just characters and a predicament, and I really, it's astonishing to me that I can work this way, because I never did before, and I certainly I never taught that way. Well, I did in the beginning when I didn't know what I was doing, but mostly I knew what I was doing. So it's very different. So I may have shifted over to your camp of writing.
Well, I don't partially. Partially. I'd be really surprised if he came all the way. Um, and I'm teasing about the cheering because whatever gets it done, and
Oh,
whoever's whatever the individual's process is terrific. Um, well, okay, you touched on movies. I'm going to jump back to one of my getting to know you questions. I have a strange little desert island, and you're going to be stuck there. But this desert island will let you play movies. For some reason, only 3 movies. So you have to watch the same 3 movies for as long as you're on the island, and you're gonna be there a long time. So which 3 movies are you gonna have?
okay. This may surprise you. This is going to be an odd collection of movies. Won't surprise you that there will be a Jane Austen because Jane Austen is so important to me. I would choose Persuasion, the 1995
Ah!
version of Persuasion. I could watch that
Which
many, many
version?
times. 1995, it's Ciarán Hinds and Amanda Leigh,
Yeah.
and it's fabulous. I could watch it over and over and over again.
Okay, the moment where they go to visit his friend at the seashore, and they're around a table at
Yes,
a dinner, and
yes,
he looks at her,
right?
that look. Whoa!
There's
Right there.
there's just so much, that's just such a wonderful piece
Yeah,
of work. Um,
yeah.
so I would choose that, and then I this most people would not choose this, but I would choose Schindler's List. Schindler's List
Ooh.
is one of the most amazing movies ever made. The transformation of Schindler, into the person he becomes, the characters around him, the mechanic, the wonderful mechanic. Um, I don't know the actor's name, but he is astonishing. There's just so many astonishing people in so
Mhm.
many astonishing roles, and um, such a powerful moment of heroism on the part of everyone that's good in that movie. So I love that movie, and it's brilliant filmmaking. And then one of the most amazing love stories that has every kind of love in it, beautifully expressed, is Monsoon Wedding. And I just adore Monsoon Wedding. I could
Oh.
watch it so many times. Um, it's just one of the best movies ever about love. The love of the parents who came together in an arranged marriage but have developed this wonderful love, their love for their children, that siblings love, the first love of the young woman who is entering an arranged marriage, and then the wonderful main character and her uh, joyous freedom at the end where she's dancing in the tent and she just catches the eye of a young man who shows up, and you just know this is it. It's just a wonderful, wonderful movie. And of course, the young men are extraordinarily beautiful. I don't know if there's more beautiful young men anywhere on the planet than the heroes of that extraordinary movie.
So clearly what connects your 3 movies is love.
Love.
Okay, here's a odd little question. I heard this somewhere else, and I thought, "What an interesting question." Um, can you think of good advice that you have chosen to ignore, and how did that turn out?
Oh, good advice that I've chosen to ignore. I've clearly chosen to ignore most of the writing advice that my much wealthier writing friends have been freely and kindly offering forever. Like almost everyone I know who's successful and it has made the great lists has changed agents, and they have always advised me to change agents, and I never have.
Mm,
And I just can't imagine myself doing it. So that's a piece of good advice. That's a very, sort of professional piece rather than like the personal piece of good advice.
mhm, mhm.
I don't know that I've been I've been good at ignoring good advice in a personal way.
Well,
Yeah.
and you would say how that has turned out for you is
It's very
fine.
positive.
Yeah,
Yeah,
because you're
very
good with where
positive.
you are and
Yeah.
how things are. That's fascinating.
I think as a result of staying where I am, I continue to have the opportunities to write the stories I wanna write, and that's the ultimate, place to be in, the opportunity to write the stories you wanna write. I was just talking to a very different friend who's had, a very big fast track opportunity and just found herself miserable in it and
Mm.
has walked away from it, and that's unfortunate, in I've been much more fortunate, I think, in having a good meeting place between opportunity and what I can actually do, and I
Or
think
want to do.
and want to do. Mhm.
Yeah. Because you could do it. It's it I have no doubt you could do whatever writing element there was. But would that make you happy?
Probably not.
Mm.
Probably not.
Okay, what sort of communications have you had from readers? What do you have any that really stand out to you?
Now, I've had fewer in-person ones. This part of the world is not a particularly romance-friendly part of the world, but I've had wonderful emails and letters from people over the years. Even though I love I stayed up all night
Mhm.
reading your book, uh, which, I've had that and appreciate that so much. And, most recently, I've had some people who didn't know about me, who were, bloggers and reviewers, be surprised. And uh, I've enjoyed the fact that they feel like they've made a
Oh,
discovery to find
yeah.
my books. And that's been that's been a real sort of pleasure to know that I'm reaching people who are thoughtful about the books and what makes a good book. That's a very satisfying response. And certainly, I have loyal people who read everything. One friend who's read everything and it's so wonderful because she always says, and they're so well written. And she says that with such a surprise, like they shouldn't be, of course, because they're romances, but actually they are so well written. It surprises her every time that that's a possibility. A romance could be well written. So I appreciate that.
Well, for your loyal readers, other than that one who's read everything, do you have any books that, haven't gotten as much attention as your others that you feel maybe even your loyal readers have overlooked a little bit?
There is one, and it's a book that's quite dear to my heart. It's the end of a trilogy. I did write the trilogy about the three um, illegitimate sons of the courtesan, uh,
Oh.
and the third book, which is called To Seduce an Angel, and and people have apparently overlooked it, thinking that there was some sort of supernatural element in the story, which there isn't. And even, my editor subsequently said, I am never using the word angel in a title ever again.
Oh.
Just I just seem to tank the book. And mislead, and it's that misleading thing, though. If you look, actually
Mm.
has a nice cover, but it's apparently misled people into thinking again that the book was not about very human lovers. And it's one of my favorites. It's the two youngest lovers I've ever written, but the two with the most wounding and difficult life experiences before they come together. So it was a great pleasure to give them a joy and a happy ending, and to
Oh, yeah.
have have them find each other. So it's a book that's been overlooked. And the other ones go on in that series, happily selling, and that one seems to not catch people's eye because of the oddness of the title. That's too bad.
What are the titles of each of the books in the series?
In the This is, you can see why we got to this point with the title, which was a mistake. But the first one is called To Tempt a Saint.
Okay.
Um, And the second one is To Save the Devil. That one, the Russians really like that one. I don't know why. And the third one was To Seduce an Angel. So that
Hmm.
last, you can see why we did it, but it was a mistake, a marketing mistake.
Yeah, that's tough. Do you have something you'd rename it if you could?
Oh, I'd have to really sit down and think about it. I think the whole, to tempt, to save, to seduce wasn't wasn't a good idea. And titles are really not my strong point. I really have trouble, and I have friends who are just great at it. They just knock out a new title, and it's a funny, clever wordplay, and I am just not good at that part. Um,
I often think, that, well, the title is not meant to tell the story. That because I tend to think of blurbs I hate because I'm thinking, if I could convey the whole book in 150 to 200 words, I would not have written 70,000 to 100,000. You know? Uh,
I like blurbs. I'm pretty good at blurbs, and
oh, good. You can do my
the
blurbs.
publisher always asks me to write, my own blurbs or to edit their blurbs, but the title thing is a kind of cleverness that just escapes me. I always admire other people with their clever wordplay titles and think, oh, why didn't that one occur to me? But it didn't. So
Well, and early in my career, with the silhouette books, you didn't get to do your own titles.
you didn't get to do anything.
So
Yeah.
I have a trilogy that is actually I did suggest the first two titles, and I had a suggestion for the third, which was denied. So book one is A Stranger in the Family. Book two is A Stranger to Love, which I love because it has the two meanings.
Mm-hmm.
And then
Mm-hmm.
uh, the third book is The Rancher Meets His Match.
Oh.
So it's very clear that's a trilogy, right? Which title does not match? Which
That's like
title did the
that's
author
a
have
Sesame
nothing to
Street
do with?
Sesame Street thing. One of these things is not like the other. Mhm.
So, somebody who's brand new to you, who hasn't read your books, what which book would you recommend, or a couple books to start?
Well, and we haven't even talked about the contemporary books that I've written.
No.
Um, you could start very small with the Ring of Truth book, which is a novella called Once Upon a Ring, which is independently out there, would be a fun, but that is contemporary. If you are historically minded, um, you might want to start the Husband Hunter series, which starts with The Husband Hunter's Guide to London that just came out in January,
Oh, fun.
um, and is the Jane Austen with spies um, stories. And the second book, which comes out in July, I just feel it's interesting. I was under the gun. I was dealing with my mother's illness and
Mhm.
passing in her house, and trying to write this book and get it in on time. And they gave me a little extra time, and it just went from me to the copy editor, and the editor read it later, and I was expecting some sort of horrible reaction. Instead, I got, "You're such a good writer." And I thought,
Oh.
"Okay, thank goodness we dodged the bullet there." Because, and I think people would like that second one, which is A Lady's Guide to Passion and Property. And that comes out in July, but it will be available very soon.
And I think sometimes when you write books under those circumstances, it it forces you to get on with it and to shut up some of the nasty voices in your head, the editorial voices in your head, the critical voices in your head, and just plow through. And I think sometimes we're surprised when we look back and think, you know, kind of like it's like you rode that bicycle without the training wheels
Mhm.
because you just had to.
It's that book also has Harry as the hero, and I'm going to very shortly put up a little post on how my Harry Clare, who becomes the Earl of Mountjoy, and Harry Sussex, Harry,
Ah,
the Duke of Sussex, how they compare, because there's a lot of similarities between the two of them in terms of age and hair color and military experience
oh,
and a
interesting.
lot of
A
good
couple
so
centuries in between, but
centuries in between, but a lot of similarities between the two of them, and everyone who's been rooting for the currently living Harry, I think, may also want to root for my Harry 2 centuries ago.
oh, that's terrific. So, okay, I'll give you a chance. Like, is there something I haven't asked you about that you'd like to talk about?
Oh, well, I want to talk just a little bit about readers and reading because um, it's readers on whom we depend. Without readers, we don't have this career, and there's so much about the act of reading that is so powerfully good for you and good for your life. And I think we write in order to encourage reading. And just on my trip, which was wonderful, and I enjoyed all my company and all the meals and all the things that we did, but there wasn't enough reading because I need a little reading every day, and I was so glad to get to that airport at the end and pull the book out of my purse and start reading, and like, oh, reading, that feels so good.
Yeah.
And so I just can't be grateful enough for readers or encourage reading more. We've got the Great American Read going on with PBS, and you can vote for a book that you love to be the Great American Read. And um, interestingly, there are some romances that hit that list, so they're in there. People might have read them and can vote for them, and you can vote even on social media. So that's kind of cool. But I just I just hope there's good reading every day in everyone's life. The little preschool teacher of our little 3-year-old has commented to his mother that he has already shown that he has found in reading comfort in a difficult moment.
Oh,
And that's what I would wish
oh,
all readers, comfort in a difficult moment from a book,
yes.
you know.
And also joy,
Joy.
to
There's
find
great joy.
joy in reading. 'Cause I definitely have. I often think about my bedroom and home growing up was upstairs and coming down to the kitchen to my mother and saying, "Listen to this. Listen to this."
Yes.
And
Yes.
mom going, "Uh-huh. Uh-huh." Yeah, okay.
Yeah,
Now will
those
you
are
get
all
out of the way of the refrigerator so I can make your make your meal?
those are all the
Yeah.
turn down pages, those wonderful moments. Yes.
Okay. Let's go. We'll do my very favorite part, the rapid fire either or.
Okay.
Okay. And I'm going to start you off with daisies or roses,
Roses.
hot air balloon or train trip,
Train trip.
cat or dog,
Dog.
coffee or tea,
Coffee.
winter Olympics or summer Olympics,
Winter.
nail polish or bare nails,
Nail polish.
cruise or trekking vacation.
Neither. That's not happening. Neither of those things.
I could get you to go on a cruise.
Nah, no cruises.
Well, I won't interrupt this to tell you.
All right.
Ice cream or cake?
Ice cream.
Spring or fall?
Fall.
Hiking boots or cowboy boots?
Hiking boots.
Pickup or sports car?
Sports car.
House decorating or gardening?
House decorating.
Paint or wallpaper?
Paint.
That's a really key question for me because I have stripped a lot of wallpaper in my life. Paper plates or best china?
Best china.
Day or night?
Day.
Opera or show tunes?
Opera.
binge watch or make the watching last as long as possible?
Binge watch, sadly.
Why sadly?
Oh, because you feel both things and it will be over, but you can't stop.
Okay. Appetizer or dessert?
Dessert?
Heels or slippers?
Neither. That's a neither. Barefoot.
Oh,
Barefoot.
okay. And this is the last one. Grab the best first or save the best for last?
Save the best for last.
That's terrific. Thank you so much, Kate. I really appreciate the time, and we haven't had a chance to have a long talk for a while, so we have to get back into that. We always wander in and out of the topic and off and around and find new topics, and I enjoy that tremendously.
We've had many good conversations, including that one in Dallas in the airport while the thunder and lightning boomed outside, and we were there forever waiting for airplanes.
But we were working out some story problems.
We were solving problems and writing new books. It was great.
It was terrific. So it's always good to spend time with you. Glad you were able to do this. And for the listeners, we hope that you will come back next week and you will meet another author and find out more about their stories behind the stories. And in the meantime, I wish you a week of terrific reading. That's the show for this week. Hope you enjoyed it, and thank you for joining Authors Love Readers podcast. Remember, you can always find out more about our guest authors in the show notes, and you can find out more about me at www.patriciamclinn.com. You can also send in questions to be asked of future authors at podcast@authorslovereaders.com. Until next week, wishing you lots of happy reading. Bye.